The restaurant shimmered like a world apart, where every crystal glass caught the light like a diamond. Waiters glided between tables with silent grace, and the hum of polite laughter floated above the low music. Then, without warning, the glass doors slammed open. 5 men in black masks stormed inside, moving fast and cold as shadows. No words, no warning. The first gunshot shattered the air like thunder. Guests screamed, ducking beneath linen-covered tables. A bottle of vintage wine exploded, crimson pouring across the marble floor like blood. At the center table sat Alexander Drake, the billionaire CEO everyone in Manhattan either feared or worshipped. His tailored suit, his calm authority, his reputation for ruthlessness, all gone in an instant as bullets tore through the room. He dropped to the ground, grabbing the edge of the table, his face pale but focused. "Security!" he shouted, but his guards were already down. The assassins were trained, efficient, merciless. They weren't there for money, they were there for him. Behind the chaos, a waitress froze. Her name was Lila Hart. 26, quiet, invisible to most people who dined there. Her tray of glasses crashed to the floor, shattering beside her trembling hands. Her heart pounded in her ears as the smell of gunpowder filled the air. She could have run. She should have run. But something inside her refused to move. Her eyes locked on the billionaire crawling toward cover. Then one of the masked men spotted him, raised his gun, aimed for the kill. And Lila, without thinking, did something no one expected. She lunged forward, grabbed a metal tray, and hurled it with perfect precision. The gun fired. The shot missed by inches. The man stumbled, cursing. For one frozen heartbeat, everyone in the restaurant turned toward the trembling waitress who had just interfered in an assassination attempt. And in that instant, Lila Hart, the invisible girl, became the most dangerous person in the room. Before that night, no one ever really saw Lila Hart. To the guests at Lorraine, she was just another polite voice saying, "Enjoy your meal, sir." She moved like smoke through the glittering restaurant, quiet, efficient, forgettable. But inside, she was a storm kept under glass. 3 years earlier, she had been a computer science prodigy at MIT, a scholarship student who built her future out of nothing but grit and sleepless nights. Then, in one cruel twist, the fire came. The lab explosion that killed her parents was ruled an accident. The company that owned the facility, Drake Industries, offered condolences in silence. Lila dropped out. Bills piled up. Her younger brother, Lucas, was blind and needed care. Every night she counted her tips, choosing between rent and medication. Lorraine was supposed to be temporary, a stopgap, not a life. But time had a way of trapping people. Now she was a waitress serving the very kind of man she blamed for everything that had gone wrong. Still, she endured. Her shift started 2 hours before the dinner crowd. She polished glasses until they sparkled like stars, memorized every menu change, smiled through exhaustion. Her coworkers said she was too serious, too quiet. But Lila had a secret. Late at night when Lucas was asleep, she still coded. Old habits never died. The soft glow of her secondhand laptop was her only light. Hidden files, encrypted programs, little reminders that she had once been something more. That evening, she had almost called in sick. Lucas's fever was rising, and the landlord had sent another eviction notice. But she needed the money. So she tied her hair back, hid the bruise of sleeplessness under concealer, and whispered to herself, "Just survive tonight." She didn't know that the man sitting at table 9 would change her life forever. She didn't know his name yet. Alexander Drake, the same man whose company logo still haunted her nightmares. She didn't know that fate had set the trap long ago, and she had no idea that by sunrise, she would either be dead or famous. Lorraine was more than a restaurant. It was a kingdom for the elite, a sanctuary where billionaires came to be admired and obeyed. Crystal chandeliers shimmered like constellations. A live pianist played notes soft as silk. Waiters glided in perfect rhythm, their movements rehearsed like a ballet. The air smelled of truffle oil, champagne, and money. For most of Manhattan, this was untouchable ground. For Lila Hart, it was just another battlefield of invisible servitude. At 8:43 p.m., the room shifted. The maitre d' straightened his tie. The piano faltered. Even the conversations dimmed. That was when Alexander Drake entered. Tall, broad-shouldered, mid-40s. His black suit seemed sculpted to fit the image of a man who owned half the city. Cameras loved his face. Sharp jawline, eyes the color of cold steel, a smile that could buy or destroy anyone. He was the kind of man who commanded silence without saying a word. Everyone knew his story. Self-made billionaire, founder of Drake Industries, the tech empire that built surveillance systems for governments and artificial intelligence for private defense. To the public, he was a genius. To insiders, a ruthless visionary. To Lila Hart, though she didn't yet realize it, he was the ghost behind her family's tragedy. He sat at table 9, the corner spot reserved for power. Alone, as usual. No entourage, no security, just a glass of 1998 Chateau Margaux and a laptop open beside him. His fingers moved across the keyboard with restless precision. The screen's glow reflected in his eyes, numbers, codes, projections. Even while dining, he was building empires. Lila approached with practiced calm, her hands steady, her voice polite. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to begin with wine?" He didn't look up. "Already poured, just leave the menu." "Yes, sir," she replied softly. But as she turned, her eyes caught the screen. A fragment of code. A pattern she recognized instantly. Something she had once written years ago. Her chest tightened. It was impossible. Before she could process it, Alexander Drake finally looked up. His gaze met hers. Sharp, unreadable, almost curious. For one suspended moment, the billionaire and the forgotten waitress stared at each other, both unaware that destiny had just pulled the trigger. The night had settled into a rhythm. Crystal glasses chimed, silverware clinked softly, and the pianist drifted into a haunting melody. Alexander Drake sipped his wine, checking something on his laptop between bites of seared salmon. Lila Hart moved from table to table, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. But beneath the polish and poise, she felt something strange, an unease crawling under her skin like static before a storm. The maitre d' excused himself to take a call. The security guard at the entrance stepped outside for a cigarette. For one fleeting minute, the restaurant existed in a perfect fragile calm. Then the doors burst open. 5 men in black masks stormed in. Their movements were too sharp, too coordinated for common criminals. One shouted, "Down!" and fired into the ceiling. Shattered glass rained like glittering snow. Screams filled the air as diners dove for cover beneath tables. The pianist froze mid-note, then dropped to the floor. Lila ducked behind a wine cart, heart pounding, her breathing ragged. Through the chaos, she saw the men spread out, 2 flanking the bar, 2 covering exits, one advancing straight toward table 9. The leader's voice was low, mechanical through the modulator. "Alexander Drake, you're coming with us." Drake didn't move. His expression was carved from ice. "Do you know what you're doing?" he asked, his tone calm, almost mocking. The leader raised his weapon. "Yes, ending your story." Lila's eyes darted to the gun. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She grabbed the nearest thing, a serving tray, and flung it across the room. It struck the gunman's wrist. The shot went wide, hitting the chandelier. Crystals exploded overhead. The leader cursed, firing again. Drake flipped the table, dragging his laptop toward him. "Stay down!" he barked at her. But she didn't. Crawling through shards of glass, she spotted one of the attacker's earpieces. A small black device blinking faintly. Military-grade encryption. Her blood ran cold. This wasn't a robbery, it was a hit. Professional, precise, paid for by someone powerful. As the room filled with smoke and chaos, Lila realized the truth. The billionaire wasn't the only target. They wanted what was on that laptop. And maybe they needed her alive to get it. Smoke coiled through the restaurant like a ghost, swallowing the chandelier's glow. The sharp tang of gunpowder filled the air. Lila crouched behind the overturned wine cart, her hands shaking as glass crunched beneath her knees. Across the room, Alexander Drake pressed a hand against his bleeding shoulder, eyes locked on the gunman spreading out like wolves. "The laptop," one hissed. "He has the drive." Lila's gaze darted to the glowing screen, half buried under shattered glass. Lines of code flickered, familiar as an old scar. Her breath caught. She knew that architecture. Those weren't ordinary financial files. It was Aegis, a prototype AI defense system, the same project that had destroyed her family. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She could almost smell the smoke of that other night years ago. The explosion, the sirens, the burned-out lab where her parents died. Back then, the media called it a tragic malfunction. But Lila had always suspected it was sabotage. And now, seeing Aegis on Drake's computer, she knew. He wasn't just a stranger. He was part of it. The leader raised his weapon again. "Give it to us, Drake." "I don't negotiate with thieves," the billionaire growled, his voice steady despite the blood soaking his sleeve. Lila's instinct screamed for her to run. But another part of her, the one that had written those lines of code at 19, refused to let him die before she got answers. She lunged for the laptop, sliding across the floor. Bullets shattered the bottles above her head. She ducked, fingers flying over the keyboard. "What the hell are you doing?" Drake shouted. "Saving your stupid life," she snapped. Her hands moved like memory, bypassing security layers she'd built years ago. "You shouldn't even have this system. It's mine." Drake froze, stunned. "Yours?" But before he could say another word, the screen flashed red. Auto-destruct sequence initiated. The attackers shouted. Drake cursed. Lila slammed the laptop shut, sweat beading on her brow. She looked him dead in the eye, voice low, trembling but fierce. "You stole this from my father?" she said. And for the first time that night, Alexander Drake looked afraid. Because the waitress who just saved his life was the daughter of the man his company had destroyed. The gunfire grew louder, echoing through the restaurant's marble walls like thunder in a cathedral. Patrons crawled under tables, sobbing. The smell of smoke, wine, and fear thickened the air. Lila Hart gripped the edge of the shattered counter, her lungs burning. The men were closing in, their boots crunching glass as they advanced toward the kitchen door. Alexander Drake staggered beside her, pale but unyielding, his right hand slick with blood. "They won't stop," he muttered. "They need what's inside that drive." "Then why not give it to them?" Lila shot back, pressing a towel to his wound. "Because what's in there could bring down half the defense network of this country." His eyes locked on hers. "If they get it, it's not just me who dies. Millions could." The realization hit her like a wave. This wasn't just revenge or greed. This was treason. The men outside weren't random mercenaries. They were professionals working for someone powerful enough to command silence. Drake grabbed her wrist. "You said it's your code. Can you stop the sequence?" "I can try," she whispered, booting the laptop again. The warning still blinked. Auto-destruct in 3 o'clock. Her fingers danced across the keys. The familiar patterns unlocked something buried inside her. The version of herself she thought had died with her parents. As she typed, a grenade rolled across the floor. Her eyes widened. "Down!" she screamed, shoving Drake behind the counter. The explosion ripped through the room, sending dust and smoke flying. Ears ringing, she pushed herself up, coughing. One of the attackers charged through the haze, weapon raised. Lila grabbed a kitchen knife and swung, slicing his forearm. He shouted, dropping the gun. Drake picked it up and fired 2 clean shots. The man fell. Drake looked at her, astonished. "You ever done that before?" She gave a shaky half smile. "You'd be surprised what waitresses learn to survive." The smoke alarm blared. Sprinklers rained down, dousing the flames. Sirens wailed in the distance. Lila's eyes returned to the flickering laptop. 010. She slammed a final command and hit enter. The screen went black. Silence. Then a faint beep. Shutdown complete. She exhaled, trembling, drenched in sweat. Drake stared at her, stunned. "Who the hell are you?" he whispered. She met his gaze coldly. "The girl your company tried to erase." The sprinklers hissed above them, turning smoke into mist. Water streamed down the marble floor, washing blood and glass into crimson puddles. Lila's chest rose and fell fast. The laptop sat dark on the counter, the final beep echoing like a heartbeat. Alexander Drake leaned against the wall, clutching his shoulder, his once perfect suit soaked and torn. For the first time in his life, he didn't look invincible. He studied her in disbelief. You stopped it. You just disabled a military-grade self-destruct. Who trained you?" "No one." Lila said softly, wiping water from her face. You already know who I am. He blinked. Hart, he murmured. David Hart's daughter. The name hung heavy in the air. Her throat tightened. You remember him? I remember everything, he said grimly. Your father was brilliant, but he… Don't! She cut in, her voice trembling with fury. Don't you dare twist what happened. You stole his research. You framed him. And when he tried to expose the truth, he died in that fire your company called an accident. Drake's jaw tensed. It wasn't me. Then who? She demanded. He hesitated, eyes flickering with something between guilt and fear. Someone inside the board. They made it look like his fault. I couldn't stop them. Lila laughed bitterly. You couldn't stop them, or you didn't want to lose your empire. The words sliced deeper than any bullet. Drake looked away, shame creeping into his eyes. If you think I sleep well at night, you're wrong. Silence pressed between them, broken only by the hiss of sprinklers and the wail of distant sirens. Then one of the masked men groaned nearby, trying to crawl toward his fallen gun. Lila turned, stepping forward, her wet shoes squeaking on the tile. She picked up the weapon first and aimed it straight at him. Who sent you? She demanded. The man spat blood and laughed weakly. You really don't know? It's bigger than him. You're already dead. Lila's pulse thudded. She knelt beside him, voice icy. Then tell your boss this, she said. Her eyes locked on his. The girl you tried to bury just found her fire. Drake stared, speechless. Because in that moment, the waitress had become the storm. The police finally arrived, sirens blaring through the soaked night. Red and blue lights flashed against shattered glass as paramedics rushed in. Lila sat on the curb outside the restaurant, shivering beneath a blanket, the smell of smoke clinging to her hair. Her hands were still trembling. Beside her, Alexander Drake was getting his shoulder bandaged, silent, his jaw set tight. Every few seconds, his eyes darted toward the building, scanning the chaos as if searching for ghosts. Then a black SUV rolled up. A tall man in a tactical jacket stepped out. Ethan Ward, Drake's head of private security. He moved with quiet precision, his voice calm, his presence commanding. Sir, I've got you. We're moving you to a safe house, he said, helping Drake to his feet. Lila watched him closely. Something about his composure felt wrong, too calm, too calculated. When Ethan's eyes met hers, there was no gratitude, no curiosity. Just cold assessment, as if measuring her usefulness. I don't go anywhere without her, Drake said, nodding toward Lila. She's the only one who can decrypt that system. Ethan's brow twitched. Understood, sir. They climbed into the SUV. The city lights blurred past, neon reflected on wet asphalt. Lila hugged herself, the unease returning. You trust him? She asked quietly. Drake glanced sideways. Ethan's been with me for 10 years. He's saved my life more times than I can count. Her gut twisted. Then let's hope he doesn't stop tonight. The car slowed as they turned into an underground parking structure. 2 more black vehicles waited. Ethan stepped out first, scanning the perimeter. All clear, he called. But Lila saw it. The flicker of movement in the rearview mirror. The brief flash of metal in his hand. Her breath caught. Drake, she screamed. Ethan spun, gun raised. You should have stayed a waitress, he sneered. Drake ducked just as the first shot exploded. Lila kicked the door open, diving behind a pillar. The blast echoed through the garage. Drake returned fire, but his wounded shoulder made him falter. Lila grabbed a wrench from the floor, flung it at Ethan's wrist. The gun clattered away. She charged, adrenaline burning through fear. Ethan smirked. You think you can stop this? She glared back, heart pounding. No, she said, voice steady. I'm just here to finish what my father started. The parking garage echoed with gunfire, flashes of light slicing through the darkness. Lila's pulse roared in her ears as she ducked behind a concrete pillar. The smell of oil, metal, and smoke mixed into something raw and choking. Alexander Drake crouched beside a car, gripping his injured shoulder, fury tightening every muscle in his face. Ethan, don't do this, he shouted. His voice cracked, not with fear, but disbelief. Ethan stepped into the light, eyes glinting with cold satisfaction. You never understood, Alex. You built an empire out of stolen bones. You thought no one would come for you? Who's paying you? Drake demanded. Ethan smirked. The same people who paid your silence 15 years ago. The ones who burned Hart's lab. The words hit Lila like a physical blow. Her breath caught. What did you say? She whispered. Ethan turned toward her, gun aimed steady. Your father was a brilliant man, sweetheart, but he didn't know when to quit. The board made sure that mistake was permanent. Memories rushed back. Sirens, flames, her mother's screams, the shadowy figure she'd seen through the smoke. Her knees nearly buckled. You were there, she said, realization slicing through the fog. Ethan's grin widened. I lit the fuse. Before he could pull the trigger, Drake lunged forward, slamming into him. The gun went off, the sound deafening. Layla seized a fallen metal rod and swung it hard across Ethan's arm. He roared, dropping the weapon. Drake tackled him to the ground, both men grappling in fury. Lila scrambled for the gun, her fingers slick with blood and sweat. Ethan overpowered Drake and reached for a knife from his boot. His eyes burned with hatred. This is how your father looked before he begged for mercy. Lila aimed and fired. The shot echoed, sharp and final. Ethan fell backward, eyes wide in shock before going still. For a long moment, only their ragged breathing filled the air. The tension snapped all at once. Drake looked at her, chest heaving. You saved me again, he said quietly. Lila's hand trembled around the gun. Don't thank me, she whispered, tears mixing with rain. He just confirmed what I've always known. Drake frowned. What's that? She looked up, voice breaking but fierce. My father was murdered, and your company paid for it. The echo of the gunshot still lingered, bouncing off the concrete walls like a ghost refusing to leave. Ethan's body lay sprawled beside the SUV, blood pooling beneath his lifeless hand. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lila stood frozen, the pistol heavy in her trembling grip. Drake rose slowly, his expression unreadable, half shock, half grim understanding. We need to move, he said at last, his voice hoarse. They'll send more. The garage alarms began to wail, red lights flashing like warnings from hell itself. Drake staggered toward the car, clutching his wound. Lila followed, her stomach twisting. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably. She'd never killed before. The image of Ethan's eyes, the disbelief, the final flicker of life seared itself into her mind. As Drake started the engine, a bullet shattered the windshield. Go! She screamed. Another car screeched around the corner, 3 more men spilling out, armed and furious. Drake slammed his foot on the gas. The SUV roared forward, tires squealing. Gunfire tore through the air, sparks flying as bullets pinged off metal. They burst through the exit ramp, slamming into the street just as a fireball erupted behind them. The explosion lit up the night sky, orange flames licking the edges of skyscrapers. The heat washed over them in a wave. Lila turned to see the garage collapsing inward, a towering inferno consuming everything inside. Her chest tightened. It felt like watching her past burn all over again. Drake swerved down an alley, braking hard behind a row of dumpsters. The engine smoked, hissing in protest. They sat there for a moment, catching their breath. Rain began to fall again, sizzling as it hit the hot metal. You okay? Drake asked quietly. Lila stared out the window, voice flat. You ever wonder how it feels to watch your whole life burn twice? He looked at her, realizing there was nothing he could say. Sirens wailed closer. He reached over, covering her hand with his. We can still fix this, he said. Her eyes met his, cold but determined. No, she whispered. We don't fix this. We expose it. Drake hesitated. Expose who? Lila's lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. The man who ordered my father's death, and who's still sitting on your board. By morning, the city was roaring with headlines. Screens across Manhattan blazed with breaking news. Billionaire Alexander Drake suspected of orchestrating deadly explosion. Footage of the burning garage looped endlessly, flames devouring luxury cars, the camera catching a shadow that looked like him limping away. Reporters shouted, speculating about corruption, espionage, and treason. Overnight, Alexander Drake went from tech savior to public enemy. Lila watched from a dingy motel room, her hair still damp from the rain. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the TV. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Police alerts, missing person bulletins, news anchors repeating the same narrative. Drake Industries CEO disappears following deadly attack. Possible fugitive. Drake paced the narrow room, his expression carved in stone. "They're fast," he muttered. "Faster than I thought." "Who's they?" Lila demanded. "The same people who paid Ethan? The ones who killed my father?" He turned to her, frustration flashing in his eyes. "Yes, the board. Or someone higher. They control everything, media, contracts, even the security footage. They're rewriting the story as we speak." Lila clenched her fists. "Then let's tell the real one." He shook his head. "No one will listen. Not until we have proof. Hard evidence." She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. Small, silver, unmarked. "You mean like this?" Drake froze. "What is that?" "I made a copy before the laptop shut down," she said quietly. "The entire Aegis data set. Every name, every transaction, including the one tied to the fire." For a second, disbelief washed over his face, followed by awe. "You realize what you're holding could destroy governments." "Good," she said. "Let them burn." He exhaled, rubbing his temples. "You have no idea how dangerous this is. They'll come for both of us." Lila stood, her voice trembling with conviction. "They already did, and I'm still here." The tension thickened. Outside, thunder rolled over the city like a warning. Drake looked at her, realization dawning slowly. "You planned this, didn't you?" She smiled faintly. "No, Mr. Drake, I survived it." And for the first time, the hunted waitress held the power the billionaires feared most. The truth. The motel room smelled of cheap detergent and fear. Rain battered the window, streaking down in silver lines. Lila sat cross-legged on the bed, the flash drive glinting in her palm like a live grenade. Across from her, Alexander Drake leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his bandaged shoulder dark with fresh blood. For the first time since she met him, he looked human, tired, wounded, stripped of arrogance. "You should walk away," he said quietly. "Take that drive and disappear before they find you." Lila's eyes hardened. "I've been disappearing my whole life. Not anymore." He studied her, as if seeing her for the first time. "You sound like your father." Her throat tightened. "You knew him better than I did, apparently." Drake nodded slowly. David was the kind of man who believed code could save the world. He thought ethics mattered in business. He was right, and it terrified them. When he discovered the board's secret contracts, he came to me first. I tried to help him, but they were already watching. By the time I realized, the lab was gone. Lila swallowed hard, her anger softening just a fraction. "You could have told the truth." "I wanted to, but they threatened my sister, my staff, everyone connected to me. I thought staying silent was mercy." "Mercy?" she snapped. "My mother drank herself to death believing he caused that fire." He flinched, the guilt plain in his eyes. "Then let me make it right. Together." Lila hesitated. "You really think I'd team up with the man who stole my father's life?" "I think you want what I want. The people behind this exposed," he said firmly. "You have the code. I have the names. Alone, we're dead. Together, we're a weapon." The room went still. Only the rain filled the silence between them. Slowly, Lila extended her hand. "We do this my way. No more lies." Drake took it, his grip firm but trembling. "Agreed." For the first time, they weren't enemies, just two broken survivors bound by the same wound. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating their faces in harsh white light. And in that fragile handshake, the hunted waitress and the fallen billionaire became allies against an empire built on ashes. For 2 sleepless nights, Lila and Drake hid in an abandoned office overlooking the East River. The city glittered outside like a lie. So clean, so untouchable. Inside, they worked in darkness, laptops glowing against the cracked walls. The flash drive was connected to an encrypted network. Lila's fingers flew across the keyboard, breaking through layers of corporate firewalls, tracing transactions back to their source. Drake hovered behind her, reading every name that appeared. And then it surfaced. "Martin Hale." Drake's expression froze. "That can't be right," he whispered. "He's been my partner for 20 years. Lila scrolled through the files. There it was, encrypted messages, wire transfers, orders for surveillance and containment. Her father's name listed under Operational Casualty Controlled Termination. She stared at the screen, her stomach twisting. "Your friend paid to have my father killed," she said flatly. Drake turned away, gripping the edge of the desk. His hands shook. "Martin was the one who pushed me to stay quiet back then. Said going public would destroy the company. I thought he was protecting us." "No," Lila said coldly. "He was protecting himself." Outside, thunder rolled across the river, the sky flashing white. Drake rubbed his temples. "If this gets out, the stock collapses, the government investigates, and everyone on that board goes down. Martin won't let that happen." "Then we make him," she replied. He looked at her, half in fear, half in admiration. "You're not the same girl I met in that restaurant." She met his gaze steadily. "She died the night they burned my father." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of rain filling the room. Finally, Drake spoke. "Martin's hosting a charity gala tomorrow night. Press, investors, half the board. If we leak this data there, he can't bury it." Lila nodded slowly. "A public reckoning." Drake exhaled. "It's dangerous." "So was breathing near your company," she shot back. A ghost of a smile flickered across his face. "Then we do it together." She closed the laptop, the decision sealing itself like a pact. And in that storm-lit room, revenge and justice finally became the same thing. The night of the gala arrived wrapped in gold and deceit. Manhattan's elite flooded the ballroom of the Reeves Tower, where chandeliers blazed like suns and violins sang above the hum of money. Cameras flashed, champagne sparkled, and every smile was rehearsed. Martin Hale stood at the center of it all. Silver hair, perfect tuxedo, the portrait of respectability. No one could see the blood on his hands. Outside, a catering van rolled up to the service entrance. Lila adjusted her black uniform and tugged a cap over her hair. Drake, dressed as a waiter, stood beside her, his jaw tight. "You're sure about this?" he asked. She gave a thin smile. "You wanted proof. Tonight we give the world a show." Inside, she blended seamlessly with the staff. Years of serving the powerful had taught her how to disappear among them. Drake moved through the crowd, carrying a tray of champagne flutes, nodding politely to men who once called him friend. Beneath the tray, a small transmitter blinked red, the device that would connect to every screen in the room once activated. At exactly 9:30, Martin Hale took the stage. The lights dimmed and the crowd applauded. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "tonight we celebrate innovation, progress, and the future, made possible by the integrity of Drake Industries." The irony stung. Layla stood near the control booth, fingers trembling over her phone. One press of a button and the entire truth, every encrypted file, every murder payment, would broadcast across the giant display behind him. Drake's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Now!" She pressed send. The room's main screen flickered, static buzzing. Then, images, documents, names, audio recordings. Martin's voice from years ago. "Burn the lab. Make it look like a malfunction." The crowd gasped. Cameras turned toward him. Martin froze mid-sentence, his face draining of color. "What is this?" he barked. Lila stepped forward from the shadows, her voice calm, carrying across the stunned room. "It's called the truth." Drake joined her, standing shoulder to shoulder. The room erupted, reporters shouting, security scrambling, investors backing away. Martin's mask cracked, fury twisting his features. "You think you can ruin me?" he snarled. Lila met his eyes unflinching. "No," she said softly. "You did that yourself." For a moment, the ballroom was silent. Then chaos erupted. Gasps, shouts, camera flashes. Every phone in the room lit up, recording Martin Hale's downfall in real time. The massive LED screen behind him played the damning footage again and again. His voice ordering the fire, his signature authorizing the payments, the timestamp proving David Hart's death had never been an accident. Martin staggered backward, color draining from his face. "This is a lie!" he shouted, his voice cracking, "fabricated by a disgruntled ex-employee and a criminal fugitive." But the crowd wasn't listening. Investors muttered in disbelief. Reporters surged forward, and security hesitated, unsure whom to protect. Lila stood near the base of the stage, her heart pounding. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. Every eye was on her, and she didn't flinch. Alexander Drake stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. You told me to stay silent 20 years ago, Martin. You said the truth would destroy us. You were right. It destroys you. Martin's composure shattered. He lunged toward the microphone, shouting, "You think this redeems you, Alex? You were part of it too. You signed off on the research that killed his family." The room gasped. Drake froze, guilt flashing across his face. Lila felt her stomach twist. "Is that true?" she whispered. Drake met her eyes, pain written across every line of his face. "I didn't know what they'd done until it was too late." Martin laughed, manic and bitter. "And now you're both finished." He reached inside his jacket. The security guards tensed, but too late. A gun glinted in his hand. He aimed it straight at Drake. Lila moved before thinking. "No!" she cried, rushing forward. The shot cracked through the air, deafening. Guests screamed. The chandelier above them trembled. Time slowed. Lila felt a searing heat tear through her shoulder. The world tilted. She collapsed, the sound of screaming fading into static. Drake caught her before she hit the ground, his voice breaking. "Lila, stay with me!" Martin stumbled backward, surrounded by flashing cameras and police charging through the doors. As she drifted into darkness, Lila managed a faint, defiant whisper. "Tell them my father's name." And the crowd chanted it back, drowning Martin Hale in the truth he'd tried to bury. The sound of the gunshot still hung in the air like thunder refusing to fade. The chandelier's crystals rattled above, raining shards of glass across the ballroom. Guests screamed, tables overturned, and security rushed forward. Alexander Drake cradled Lila in his arms, her blood soaking into his tuxedo, bright against the white linen. Her eyes fluttered, unfocused, lips trembling as she tried to breathe. "Stay with me," he begged, his voice cracking for the first time. "Lila, don't you dare close your eyes." Her voice was barely a whisper. "He killed my father. Don't let him—" "Shh," Drake said, pressing his hand over her wound. "I won't. I swear I won't." Across the room, Martin Hale stumbled toward the exit, waving his gun wildly. The crowd scattered like terrified birds. His perfect image was gone, his hair disheveled, his face twisted with rage. "You think this ends with me?" he shouted. "You have no idea who really runs this company." Drake's eyes darkened. He gently laid Lila on the floor, then rose, every movement deliberate. "Maybe not," he said quietly, picking up the fallen gun from beside her. "But I know how to end you." He strode across the ballroom, the chaos blurring around him. Reporters filmed every second. Martin aimed again, hands shaking. The two men who had built an empire of lies now faced each other amid the ruins of their creation. "Alex," Martin hissed, "you wouldn't shoot me. You're not a killer." Drake raised the gun. "No," he said coldly, "but you made one." Martin fired first. The shot went wide. Drake squeezed the trigger. One clean shot. Martin's body jerked, then fell backward onto the stage he'd ruled for decades. Silence followed, thick and final. Drake dropped the weapon, chest heaving. Security swarmed the room, police rushing in, cameras caught everything. The billionaire kneeling beside the dying waitress, the villain lying dead before a wall of shattered glass and truth. Lila's fingers twitched weakly as Drake took her hand. "It's over," he whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. A faint smile curved her lips. Then, "My father can finally rest." Her hand went limp. Drake's throat tightened, his eyes burning as he whispered the only words left in him. "You saved us all, Lila." And for the first time in his life, Alexander Drake wept in front of the world. 3 days later, the world had already turned her story into legend. Headlines screamed across every screen. "Waitress saves billionaire, exposes murder conspiracy." Talk shows replayed the footage of the gala, the shot, the fall. Hashtags filled social media. #justice for David Hart, #Lila the Lionheart. But Lila Hart knew none of it. She was floating somewhere between pain and silence, her body wired to machines, her left shoulder bandaged and burning with every breath. The first thing she heard was the steady beep of a heart monitor. The second was a voice, low, rough, familiar. "You're safe," Alexander Drake murmured. He was sitting beside her bed, suit wrinkled, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. "You made it, Lila." Her lips moved weakly. "I thought I died." "You almost did," he said softly. "The bullet missed your heart by less than an inch." She blinked, her gaze drifting to the window where sunlight streamed in, a strange golden piece after all the fire. "What happened to Martin?" Drake exhaled slowly. "He's gone. The board's under investigation. The police have everything they need. Your father's name has been cleared." For a moment, she just lay there, letting the words sink in. Years of guilt, grief, and rage began to uncoil from her chest. She could finally breathe. "He didn't die for nothing," she whispered. Drake leaned forward, voice breaking. "No, he died protecting something good. And you," his throat tightened, "you reminded me what that meant." She studied him, the man who had once represented everything she hated. Now his armor was gone, and beneath it was just a man who looked older, smaller, human. "You knew the whole time," she said softly. "The truth eats people alive." He nodded. "It almost ate me, but you burned it down." A faint smile tugged at her lips. "Guess I got that from my dad." Outside the door, reporters begged for interviews, the world waiting for a glimpse of her. But Lila turned away from the noise, her eyes closing again, her voice steady. "Tell them I'm not a hero," she murmured. "I'm just the daughter of one." Drake's hand tightened gently around hers, and for the first time in years, Lila Hart slept without nightmares. 2 weeks later, the courtroom overflowed. Reporters packed every bench, cameras buzzed, and the entire nation watched the fall of an empire. On the stand, executives from Drake Industries confessed one by one. Offshore accounts, falsified safety records, secret military contracts. The final name read aloud was Martin Hale, now deceased, listed as the orchestrator of the cover-up. But it was the next name that silenced the room. David Hart. The judge's voice rang out, steady and solemn. "Posthumously exonerated. Cause of death? Murder. Verdict? Innocent." In the gallery, Lila sat beside Alexander Drake. Her shoulder was still in a sling, but her eyes were clear, bright, unbroken. She didn't cry when the verdict came. She just smiled, a small, trembling smile that carried the weight of a decade. Drake glanced at her, whispering, "He'd be proud." Outside the courthouse, microphones surrounded them like bees. "Miss Hart, how does it feel to be America's new hero?" one reporter shouted. Lila paused, the wind tugging at her hair. "My father was the hero," she said quietly. "I just finished what he started." The crowd cheered. Flashbulbs lit her face like fireworks. In the following days, justice rippled outward. The government seized corrupt assets, launched full investigations into the defense contracts, and shut down the illegal AI program permanently. Drake Industries restructured, cutting every tie to the past. At Drake's insistence, the company created the David Hart Foundation, a scholarship fund for underprivileged students studying technology with ethics. Drake met with Lila at the launch ceremony. The press surrounded them again, but this time there was no hostility, only admiration. He handed her a silver plaque engraved with her father's name. "You made sure he was remembered for what he truly was," he said. Lila looked down at it, her reflection shimmering on the metal surface. "Maybe now he can rest," she whispered. The cameras flashed again, capturing the moment. A billionaire once cursed by greed standing beside the waitress who destroyed his silence. The world called it redemption. As the crowd applauded, Drake leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You changed everything, Lila." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "No," she said. "The truth did, and with that truth, the ghosts of the past finally let go." 1 year later, the city felt different. The skyline still glittered, the streets still pulsed with life, but something softer had settled in the air, a quiet sense of balance. On the corner of Fifth Avenue, a small cafe had replaced the ruins of the restaurant where it all began. Its sign read, "Heart and Haven." Every morning, the smell of coffee drifted through the open doors, welcoming anyone who needed warmth. Inside, Lila Hart wiped down a table near the window. Her hair was shorter now, her movements slower, more peaceful. A scar traced her shoulder, a quiet reminder of the night that changed everything. She wasn't famous anymore. The cameras had moved on. But for the first time in her life, she didn't need the world to see her. She finally saw herself. The bell above the door jingled. Alexander Drake stepped inside, dressed in a simple gray coat instead of a suit. He looked older, but lighter, as if he had laid his ghost to rest. He carried a small envelope. "You run a fine place," he said softly. She smiled. "I serve better coffee than I used to." He chuckled, setting the envelope on the counter. "Inside is an offer. Chief Technology Officer, Drake Industries is rebuilding. Ethically this time, with your code, your vision." Lila studied the envelope for a long moment, her reflection trembling on the polished surface. "You really think I'd go back to that world?" "I think you already changed it," he replied. "Now you get to lead it." She looked around her cafe. Students with laptops, a homeless man sipping free coffee, laughter mixing with music. "I built this place from nothing," she said, "just like my father built his dream. Maybe it's time to build something bigger." Drake's eyes softened. "Then this time you do it right." Lila reached for the envelope and smiled, the kind that carried both closure and beginning. "Tell your board I'll see them Monday." He nodded, pride flickering behind his eyes. "Welcome back, Miss Hart." As he left, sunlight spilled through the window, glinting off the plaque above the counter. "In memory of David Hart, the truth always rises." Lila watched the city outside, her reflection merging with the light. And for the first time, her story didn't end in fire. It ended in peace. So that's how the story ends. Pretty wild, right? But if you're still here, listening to this moment, maybe something about Lila's journey touched you in a quiet way. Maybe it reminded you that even the smallest act of courage can change everything. Life will always throw chaos, betrayal, and pain at us. But as the Stoics taught, we can't control what happens, only how we respond. Lila chose truth over fear, compassion over revenge, and through that, she healed herself. Sometimes healing doesn't come from running away from the fire, but from walking through it with purpose. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The obstacle is the way." Every struggle, every heartbreak, every injustice you faced, it's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your strength. So if you're carrying something heavy tonight, remember, the truth always rises and so can you. If this story moved you, even just a little, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Not just for us, but to spread stories that remind people that courage, kindness, and truth still matter. We'll meet again in the next story, my friend. Stay strong and keep your light burning.